1770s, and closing of the Boston Harbor. It was insufferable. When George walked into the Burgess house, they knew that war had to be. He was dressed in his full regalia military uniform. And you know, as it came to pass in 1776, well, I must move on a little bit because there's so much that's happened. But well, the smallpox were breaking out in Boston and Philadelphia. I did go to Philadelphia during that summer of 1776, you know so well of. I did go to Boston, and then I went to Philadelphia. And when the signing was done, I was not in the city because George told me to quarantine myself. I stayed outside the city while they had their transactions going on. In 1777, the Valley Forge, and the men were asking me to come. They would call me the Great Lady Dragoon. They were asking me, the nurse person that would come and help it. But my concern was to make George comfortable as much as possible. If George is going to be comfortable, then the rest of the soldiers would be more comfortable, would they not? And I would can and dry food and meat and so forth during the summer, and then bring our goods and our wagons down to the encampments during the winters. Every 6 months, I would stay at the winter encampments. They would call me the Great Preambulator. I never liked to travel, but I was traveling from one to the other. And I felt like I was George's, the general of the army, the Continental Army, but I was the general of the dinner. I was the general of the hospitality and so forth. And there was about 2,000 women spread among the encampments, 12,000 men in the Valley Forge, well, maybe 400 women there. Well, so we did what we could, but there was one night that was of great gaiety. When the French made their alliance with us, I danced nearly all night with Nathaniel Greene's wife. It was a wonderful time, that few hours that we could celebrate. Mostly Valley Forge was a military and not a battle type of thing. But I cannot go into all the battles. And so it was that we continued on, and indeed, Yorktown finally came, and my George had only been home for one time into the Mount Vernon, one time through the entire war, and then he came home, and John, my last child, went with him to the Yorktown, and he passed away during that time. But Yorktown, Mr. Morris, thank you. Molly did a beautiful job of hosting the French general and General George at their house. You had several houses, and she was the most magnificent woman of hospitality, which was so important because the British thought we didn't even know how to use a knife and a fork. And there, Molly put on that beautiful dinner for the just before the Yorktown battle. So thank you for that. And we know that within a year or so after Yorktown, there was complete that we won. We won the Revolutionary War. It was so magnificent. George had walked down to New York, and he was right alongside with the Louisiana Territory Cuban governor, right alongside down the New York parade. The shots and the cannons and the fireworks, and we won the war. George needed to do some more tying up loose ends and so forth, if things could be done. I gave up on the gallbladder, but I stayed in New York a little longer until I got through this period of illness. And then I went back down to Mount Vernon, and we were so elated to be able to think that we were done with the military things, and the colonies were free, and we could live in our Mount Vernon again. The colonies did not get along, and George would go do some surveying around Pennsylvania, different places French-Indian War with, but he would also be going back to the Continental Congress of Parts and delegating and doing what he could, talking. He was a good negotiator. You know, he always felt a little lesser than Adams and Jefferson, who could speak languages and had a formal education, and George did not. So I kind of think that his sense of lesser, it felt a little bit lesser than the others. I think that also gave him an ability to communicate and be humble enough to be able to negotiate with them. But it was that the waterways were in contest with one another, and the manners were different from one another, and well, you know, it finally came to where we needed a constitution. Thank you, Madison. And so they decided we needed a president. He would not be king. This is for the people to vote. The people are going to have their individualism is to be. The votes went out among the colonies. It took several weeks for the votes to come back in, and finally when the votes came in, it was unanimous. George was elected president. And I was not all that happy about it. He was there up in New York, and he was inaugurated, and I was at Mount Vernon, but I will rise to whatever the call is that I need to do for my husband. And I will help him whatever way I can. And so I gathered up my entourage, and now I have these grandchildren. Now John, that had passed away, had 3 girls and a boy, but we kept the 2 younger ones, and the other 2 stayed with their mother. So anyway, I had those grandchildren and other people, and we went through some fanfare through Philadelphia and so forth. We got to the Hudson River, and George had been inaugurated, and here we are, 13-gun salute to the Lady Washington. And now, what they call First Lady. And we lived in New York for a while, a year and a half, and then it was time to go to Philadelphia. And we did not have a home in Philadelphia. However, Mr. Morris, would you mind stepping up here a moment? I want to thank you for giving us a new home. We lived in your home for 8 years.
It's so good to see you.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Yes, well, you contributed so much to the war, and I wanted to say personally thank you for letting us live in your house. Adams lived in it after us for a little bit. Several had lived in it before you. You were a financier of our war.
Yes, as you know, Mrs. Washington, I was a merchant, I was a businessman, I had a number of businesses and homes. And when I looked at the situation, what was going on, the military, the general said he needed help, and Congress really wasn't doing much. And so I felt that Providence had called me to step in to provide the weapons, the food, the supplies, everything that was needed.
If we had not had your financing, the Revolutionary War probably would not have made it. Thank you so much for what you did.
You're welcome.
And then Molly, she did such a great, she and I were confidants, and when she would walk by a window, and the people in Philadelphia would walk by the window, they would see her and they would applaud, just seeing her after she had done so much for so many, and I appreciated so much. As the presidency moved on, and we had to go ahead and take another 4 years and so forth, by the end of the 1790s, you had made some investment.
Something that I really regret. I had some secure businessmen that were standing behind me, supposedly, and we looked to the western lands, the wilderness. It was a great opportunity for our new citizens of this new nation to move out into.
Well, yes, who would think, to buy land would be a great investment, right?
Well, unfortunately, they didn't step up, and I ended up in debtor's prison for 3 years.
Yes, and I asked Molly if she would like to come live with us at Mount Vernon. But of course, she wanted to stay and see you every day and visit with you, which she did, and the children, yes. But you lived another 5 years after you got out of the prison, and it was a nice cottage you had.
Yes.
I appreciate you coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. So, here we are. Oh, so many things happen. Perhaps you have some thoughts or questions yourself, or comments. So, by the time George had finished his 8 years, I had almost felt like I was a prisoner of the state at times, you know, and be a presidential wife, and hospitality was extremely important, showing us the British that we knew how to be civilized and so forth. Well, we finally got back to the Mount Vernon, and George could do his fox hunting, and we had so many hounds. Sweetlips, he was a cutie. We had so many, well, he was out fox hunting one day, about 2 years after the presidency, and it was in a storm, it was wet, it was raining, he got wet, and he came back to the house. We were having a gathering like we did every Thursday and Friday, sometimes Tuesdays. Someone was there, but he did not change his clothes. So the next day he woke up